This reading is from Beelzebub's Tales of His Grandson, chapter 47, The Inevitable Result of Impartial Mentation. Beelzebub intended to say more, but just then, it was suddenly lit up with a pale blue something. From that moment, the falling of the ship Karnak began to diminish perceptibly in speed. All this meant that one of the great cosmic ogoegoplasties was about to take alongside the spaceship Karnak. And indeed, through the transparent outer parts of the ship Karnak, the source of that pale blue something soon became visible, which lit up not only the whole of the interior of the ship Karnak, but also all the space of the universe surrounding this great cosmic ego Leonopti, as far as the ordinary vision of beings could reach. Of these great ego Leonoptes, there are only 4 in the universe, and each of them is under the jurisdiction of one of the 4 all-quarters maintainers of the universe. A hurried and anxious commotion began among all the passengers aboard, and the crew assembled in the main hall, situated in the center of the ship. Each of them bore a branch of myrtle in one hand and a dead kashko in the other. When the great cosmic ego Leonopti had come alongside the ship Karnak, certain parts of the latter were moved apart in a special way. And there passed from the ego Leonopti into the main hall of the ship a procession composed of several archangels and a multitude of angels, cherubim, and seraphim. And they too bore branches in their hands, but of palm. At the head of this procession walked a venerable archangel, and immediately after him, 2 cherubim followed solemnly, bearing a casket from which something also radiated, but this time something orange. In front of everyone in the main hall of the ship Karnak stood Beelzebub, and behind him were ranged his kinsman and the captain of the ship. And all the others stood behind them at a respectful distance. When the said procession from the ego Leonopti neared the beings of Beelzebub's nature, who were assembled in expectation, they halted, and all of both forces, differently natured, 3-brained beings, joined together in singing the hymn to our endlessness, which hymn is always sung on such occasions everywhere in the universe by beings of all natures and all forms of exterior coating. This hymn consists of the following words: Thou long patient creator of all that breathes, thou abundantly loving cause of all that exists, thou unique vanquisher of the merciless Herapas. Now, to the sounds of our glorifying, only rejoice and abide in beatitude. By thy unprecedented labors, thou hast given us the beings, thou hast given us the beginning of all our arisings. By the vanquishing of the Herapas have we obtained the possibility of perfecting ourselves to the sacred Anklad. And now, only rest as merited, and we, in gratitude, will maintain all that thou hast created, and always and in all things will extol thee forever. Extol thee, Maker Creator, thou, the beginning of all ends, thou, proceeding from infinity, thou, having the end of all things within thyself, thou, our endless endlessness. When the hymn had been sung, and the venerable archangel approached Beelzebub and solemnly proclaimed, by the decree of his all quarters maintainer, the arch-cherub Peshnavogna, and bearing his own sacred rod, we appear before you, your right reverence, in order to restore to you, in accordance with the pardon granted you from above, and for certain of your merits, that which you lost during your exile, your horns. Having said this, the venerable archangel turned towards the casket borne by the cherubim, and with profound reverence, carefully took from it the sacred rod. Meanwhile, all those present knelt down on one knee while the angels and cherubim began to sing the appropriate sacred canticles. Taking the sacred rod in his hand, the archangel turned again towards Beelzebub and spoke thus to the beings of Beelzebub's nature. Beings created by our same uni-being endlessness, who has pardoned this once erring being, Beelzebub, who by the infinite grace of our Creator will again exist among you, beings like himself. As the variety and degree of reason of beings of your nature are defined and manifested by the horns on your head, we must, with the permission of our all quarters maintainer and with your help, restore the horns lost by Beelzebub. Beings created by our one common Father, your aid will consist in this, that each of you should consent to renounce for Beelzebub's merited pardon certain particles of your own horns. Whosoever therefore consents and wishes to do so, let him approach the sacred rod and touch its handle. And on the length of time the handle of the sacred rod is held will depend the amount of active elements passing from your own horns for the formation of the corresponding horns of this pardoned being of your nature. Having said this, the venerable archangel, holding the chief end of the sacred rod, that is, the ball, over the kneeling Beelzebub, turned the handle towards those there assembled in such a way that whoever wished might touch it. As soon as the venerable archangel had finished speaking, a very great commotion began among the beings of Beelzebub's nature, each desiring to approach nearer and be the first to touch the sacred rod with his hands as long as possible. Order, however, was soon established, and each of them in turn approached and held the handle for as long as it was indicated by the captain of the ship, who had taken upon himself the necessary direction. During the solemn, sacred action, horns, little by little, began to grow upon the head of Beelzebub. At first, while just the bare horns were being formed, only a concentrated quiet gravely prevailed among those assembled. But from the moment the forks began to appear upon the horns, a tense interest and rapt attention began to be manifest among them. This latter state proceeded among them because everybody was agitated by the wish to learn how many forks would make their appearance on Beelzebub, since by their number, the gradation of reason of which Beelzebub had attained, according to the sacred measure of reason, would be defined. First, one fork formed, then another, and then a third. And as each fork made its appearance, a clearly perceptible thrill of joy and unconcealed satisfaction proceeded among all those present. As the fourth fork began to be formed on the horns, the tension among the assembled reached its height, since the formation of the fourth fork on the horns signified that the reason of Beelzebub had already been perfected to the sacred Ternulad, and hence that there remained for Beelzebub only two gradations before attaining to the sacred Anklad. When the whole of this unusual ceremony neared its end, and before all those assembled had had time to recover their self-possession from their earlier joyful agitation, there suddenly and unexpectedly appeared on the horns of Beelzebub, quite independently, a fifth fork of a special form known to them all. Thereupon, all without exception, even the venerable archangel himself, fell prostrate before Beelzebub, who had now risen to his feet and stood transfigured with a majestic appearance, owing to the truly magnificent horns which had arisen on his head. All fell prostrate before Beelzebub because by the fifth fork on his horns, it was indicated that he had attained the reason of the sacred Podkulad, that is, the last gradation of reason before the reason of the sacred Anklad. The reason of the sacred Anklad is the highest to which, in general, any being can attain, being the third in degree from the absolute reason of his endlessness himself. But the reason of the sacred Podkulad, to which Beelzebub had already perfected himself, is also very rare in the universe. Hence, even the venerable archangel prostrated himself before Beelzebub, because his own degree of reason was as yet only that of the sacred Deglindad, that is, wanting 2 degrees to the reason of the sacred Anklad. When all had risen to their feet, the venerable archangel, addressing this time all the assembled beings of various natures, proclaimed, "Beings created by one creator, we have all just become worthy to be the first to behold the final formation of the appearance of that which is a dream both of all those present and all the beings in general of the whole of our great megalocosmos. And now, let us all together exult and rejoice over such a worthiness, which is for us such a revivifying shock for our ability to struggle against our own denying source, which ability alone can lead us to that sacred podklad attained by one of the sons of our common Father, who, although he first transgressed on account of his youth, yet afterwards was able, by his conscious labors and intentional sufferings, to become worthy with his essence, to be one of the very rare sacred individuals of the whole of our great universe. After this proclamation of the archangels, all the beings, without exception, present on the spaceship Karnak, then began to sing the prescribed sacred canticle entitled, I Rejoice. And when this last sacred canticle also had been sung, all the angels and cherubim, with the venerable archangel at their head, returned to the cosmic Igolianopti, which then left the ship Karnak and disappeared gradually into space. Whereupon the passengers and crew began to disperse to their place, and the Karnak resumed its falling towards its destination. Rejoice, Beelzebub.
when they had taken their places, they sat down, this time not with the unconstraint they had formerly shown. Then Beelzebub, turning to Hassin, said, "First of all, my boy, I give you my word that when we return home, unless any event from external causes, independent of our essence, will prevent this, I shall explain to you everything relating to the three-brained beings who have taken your fancy, concerning that which, during this journey of ours on the ship Karnak, I promised to explain, but which I have for some reason or other left unexplained. But meanwhile, if you have any question in mind that now needs explanation, ask. I warn you, however, that we have not enough time to reply in the manner that has become proper to our talks during all this time. And hence, try to formulate your question in such a way that my answer also may be brief. By such a question, you can even apropos once more show me to what extent your logical mentation has increased during my tales concerning the strange psyche of the three-centered beings arising and existing on the planet Earth. At this proposal of his grandfather, Hassin deeply thought, rather a long time, and then, in an exalted mood, spoke as follows. Sacred Podkulad and fundamental cause of the cause of my arising, since the solemnity which has just taken place, when your sacred essence became coated with a corresponding visible exterior, and when thereby the whole of its significance, which cannot be perceived nor understood by all three brain beings, became clear and even sensible to me, as well as to every other cosmic unit, save yourself. Every word spoken by you and every counsel of yours is taken by me as law. I must therefore strive with the whole of my presence to carry out the suggestion you have just made to me and try as well and as briefly as possible to formulate my question. Sacred Podkulad and cause of the cause of my arising, in order that the convictions formed in me during this time, owing to your explanation of the abnormalities proceeding on the earth, may become definitely crystallized in me, I still wish very much to have this time your personal and frank opinion as to the following. How you would reply if, let us suppose, our all-embracing Creator Endlessness himself were to summon you before him and ask you this: Beelzebub, you, as one of the anticipated, accelerated results of all my actualizations, manifest briefly the sum of your long-centuried, impartial observations and studies of the psyche of the three-centered beings arising on the planet Earth, and state in words whether it is still possible by some means or other to save them and to direct them into the becoming path. Having said this, Hassin arose and, standing in a posture of reverence, began to look expectantly at Beelzebub. And Ahun also rose. Beelzebub, smiling lovingly at this question of Hassin's, first said that he was now quite convinced that his tales had brought Hassin the desired results. And then, in a serious tone, he continued that if our all-embracing, uni-being creator should indeed summon him before him and ask him thus, he would answer, Thereupon, Beelzebub suddenly also arose, unexpectedly, and having stretched his right hand forward and his left hand back, he directed his vision somewhere afar off. And it seemed that with his sight he was, as it were, piercing the very depths of space. Simultaneously, something pale yellow began little by little to arise around Beelzebub and to envelop him. And it was in no way possible to understand or to discern whence this something issued, whether it had issued from Beelzebub himself or proceeded to him from space, from sources outside of him. Finding himself in these cosmic actualizations, incomprehensible for all three brain beings, Beelzebub, in a loud voice, unusual for him, very penetratingly intoned the following words: Thou all and the allness of my wholeness. The soul means now for saving of the beings of the planet Earth would be to implant again into their presences a new organ, an organ like Kundabuffer, but this time of such properties that every one of these unfortunates during the process of existence should constantly sense and be cognizant of the inevitability of his own death, as well as of the death of everyone upon whom his eyes or attention rests. Only such a sensation and such a cognizance can now destroy the egoism completely crystallized in them that has swallowed up the whole of their essence, and also that tendency to hate others, which flows from it, the tendency, namely, which engenders all those mutual relationships existing there, which serve as the chief cause of all their abnormalities, unbecoming to the three brain beings, and maleficent for them themselves and for the whole of the universe.
Hymn to our endless Creator.
I've only one purpose, my immediate purpose at this moment, is to become more aware of myself, free myself from my attachment, identification, free myself from external impressions, begin to work as I only find necessary, having started. I begin, and having begun, I see how necessary it is. I don't have to think long how to begin. There's a tradition created for me. I start from the head, directing my attention to the body. And I take my own time. I take part of the body. I take the right arm. Start with the shoulder. I work down, pass down, and I don't leave the shoulder and go down to the bicep until I actually experience some sensation there. There is sensation everywhere. I'm almost totally unaware of it. I begin to be aware of it. I pass down into the crook, the elbow, and then to the forearm, then into the palm of the hand, the back of the hand, that's the right hand, which rests in the fingers of the left hand, the pads of the fingers, the inside of the fingers. They go up the hand again into the palm, the wrist, forearm, bicep, the shoulder. There's the sensation of the whole arm, total sensation of that limb. And I pass on and add, I don't forget that. That is there, the sensation is there. And I direct some of my attention from the head to the right leg, starting in the hip joint. I don't go to the thigh until there is sensation there. Strangely, if I wait and hold back, if I don't hurry, I find the sensation that the thigh is actually waiting, calling. It's the same thing with the knee and the shin, the calf of the right leg, the right ankle, the instep, the toes. Now the third limb to be added. Again, I start from the hip, the thigh, the inside of the knee, the kneecap, the shin, calf of the leg. All these places tingling with sensation. Instep, ankle, each tip, each toe separate. The little toe, the next one, I don't be impatient, I only have to direct my attention there. The sensation will come. Maybe I have to be satisfied with the toes not entirely separated yet. Maybe I haven't got enough experience to separate those all easily. Nevertheless, there's a strong sensation in the toes. As I mount up the left foot, the ankle, the shin, I'm also aware of the right arm and the right leg as well. Now I pass to the right arm. Again I start from the shoulder. I go down. Stage by stage, and return stage by stage. There is a new being fact, the being fact of the conscious sensation in those four limbs. Now as I pass the sensation to the spine, the spinal cord, which I trace up vertebrae by vertebrae, I also adjust the whole of my posture. I see that it's as it should be to allow me to work the best. The spine has to be vertical, the head not thrust forward, not tense, shoulders down. Stomach not drawn up. Sensation of those four limbs is still there as I go up the spine, vertebrae, one after the other. As I reach the base of the skull, I continue up over the top of the skull, over the forehead, down into the eye sockets. I feel, I sense the eyes, not like hard marbles, but like soft spheres lying in the hollow of those eye sockets, relaxed. No central tension in them at all. Relaxing the walls of the eye sockets. I sense the connection, the passage from the eyes sockets into the nasal sinuses, from there into the roof of the mouth. I sense the lips touching the front teeth. I sense the tongue lying completely relaxed, touching the inside of the teeth. I sense the back of the throat. The sense through the throat into the part of the neck below the chin. There's the sensation of the head, and I pass down finally to the sensation of the breast and the solar plexus. It's a spreading sensation over the periphery of the breast and the solar plexus. Quickly I bring in again all the other parts sensed. There is a whole of sensation. The body of sensation. Now I again divide my attention. And now I put my attention onto my breathing. I notice as I breathe in an impression in the breast, the solar plexus. I notice the sensation. But if I look very carefully, without forcing, I discern another form of, another process there. Something different from the kind of sensation that I've had in all the other parts. It's a sort of ebb and flow. There is a sensation there, a more continuous process. This feeling has an ebb and a flow. It corresponds with the in-breath and the out-breath. And with part of my attention left on the sensation of myself, the parts and the whole, I follow with the rest of it the incoming breath, the experience in the breast as it arrives, and then I'm aware as I expire, as I breathe out, the force remaining from that active force of the air. Maybe I can discern it descending into the pit of the stomach, into the area of the sex organs, like a two-way flow. The used air going upwards, the mixture going downwards. And then with the next incoming breath, I see if I can discern this fine energy from the pit of the stomach rising up to meet the incoming air. It rises through a path, through the navel, into the solar plexus, and meets there the incoming air. This is the experience of the meeting of those two forces. This fine active element of the air, this higher hydrogen, meeting with a still finer force rising from the pit of the stomach, mingling together and producing a main force which again sinks down into the pit of the stomach, the used portion flowing out. I need a very quiet balance to maintain the awareness of that. I need on no account to lose the awareness of the sensation of the whole of my body, the parts, each part and the whole as one, and this process of breathing in and breathing out. I seek to understand the difference between these two processes. I seek to understand the relation of these two processes. Now, in this effort, I begin to experience the separation of the head. I begin to see that this search, this inquiry into the relation of the two different processes is conducted from the head. It is almost as if I breathed in a further kind of breath, as if I breathed in impressions, as if there were a very fine force which enters from the crown of the head, which joins with the entrance of the breath, descends with it, helps it to descend, and joins in the awareness of this event in the breast, which mingles with a force rising from the pit of the stomach and completes the process. Again, I see the head as the maintainer of the balance of this attention on the whole periphery of the body, the sensation, this strong process of breathing, feeling of myself, and my head recording. I work. I maintain this balanced state. I realize I am. The head also has spare attention to see that there are no bad postures arising, to see that the correct relaxation pertains in all parts, to see that they're properly related in the posture. That work is done instantaneously in the head. It only has to be conceived to be achieved. It in no way interrupts the work of the actual sensing, the actual feeling and respiration. I receive this force of air, goes into the pit of the stomach, rises again, second body food. Now, without stopping this sensation, without failing to observe this rise and fall of the breath, I become aware of a certain sort of wholeness. It's as if I'm enclosed and protected by a body, and the whole of my thought is centered in that body. It's a sphere. The attention doesn't go outside at all. I work and the whole of my processes are inner. Impressions enter. My attention does not go out. Higher visions of the air enter. My attention remains within. The head impressions enter. My attention remains within. I wish to be self-responsible. In complete relaxation, without tension, I seek to absorb this triple impressions, I seek that the state in which the transformation can take place can be maintained. I seek to absorb and digest this food. Everything is in process within me. Only balanced attention is necessary. Nothing else. I am free of thought. I work. I work with sense concepts. I work with feeling concepts. I work with a mind. Free of words. Innerly, on the in-breath, silently, I say I. And outwardly, on the outward breath, I say am, silently 3 times. I experience that silent I am. I experience the force of the I. I experience the fact of the am. I am. And now, in my own time, I murmur, not loud, but audibly, on one breath, in breath, I. And on the next in breath, am. I hear the vibration, I experience the sound. I am 3 times. I am. I. This is a final adjustment. I now remain assimilating the food that I've received. Balanced, relaxed.
Orthodox hymn for a midnight service.